We will have the conversations that few are prepared to have, and more importantly, conversations centered on rationality. Subscribe now to listen to Rational Voices with Sunil. Leilani, thank you for joining today. I thought we could just go straight into it. You know, I obviously know you from social media. You're a massive voice on X, formerly Twitter. You obviously had a career before all of that. So
Yeah.
if you just like to let everyone know what that was.
Well, I was 18 years old and I was actually studying economics at Royal Holloway University. And I got spotted for the Miss Great Britain competition. So I went into the Hippodrome. Um, I took part. I think apparently Simon Cowell was one of the judges, and they asked me what I thought success was. And that was my question. I mean, obviously, there was the bikini bit and the evening dress thing before it all turned crazy PC. And then that was my question, what do you think success is? And I think I said something like, it's just achieving your goals and your dreams. There's no monetary value on it. There's nothing particular. It's just achieving. Anyway, I ended up winning that and went to Miss Universe, which actually, I think it was the first year Donald Trump had taken on the brand of Miss Universe. So took part in that, and that meant taking a year out of university. But modelling went really well. And I ended up leaving university completely and decided just to go into modelling, and from there investing in property and so forth. After modelling, I decided to go to America, and I lived in LA for 17 years. I did a couple of TV shows there. I worked as a real estate agent out there. And I decided I just had enough of that life, wanted to come back to England. So moved back to England about 6 years ago now. And then I was asked to do the Housewives of Cheshire because it's a silly reality show, but it taught me actually a lot. It taught me about the entertainment industry, how they enjoy splitting the audience, meaning they liked the women on the show to argue. And once the show was done and gone out on TV, they loved it when the audience would then talk about it and arguments themselves at home to their friends on social media, which I found, has kind of translated into a lot of the breakfast shows and news shows and whatever, splitting the audience, getting everyone angry and uptight. After that, COVID happened. And I guess, it all kind of went from there for me in terms of being like a kind of social commentator, really.
Amazing. I mean, we'll definitely dive into COVID. You were so almost or ahead of your time in terms of so many people. You were one of the first people I was following that was speaking out against a lot of the COVID restrictions very early on. But we'll go into that shortly. What was
Yeah.
it like being in the sort of entertainment industry, modeling industry? You when you Google yourself, it comes up as like conservative commentator. So I
Yeah.
can there weren't too many people who had similar views to you. Did that was that all
No.
you or
Well, it was strange because it does always come up as conservative commentator. And I think it's because, I have been more on the conservative side of things, but it more started around social issues that have become politicized. And I found that I've sat more on the conservative side of that. Not the fake Tories, but, conservative, sorry, that's not the Tories, but kind of conservative as, not a liberal. But having said that, while I was in Los Angeles, I perhaps was a little more liberal in terms of my thinking. And I realized, sorry, that's my dog coughing
okay?
in the background. Um, and then I realized as that had gone, I was actually very mistaken in my way of thinking. It took me to come back to England. I think it took a lot of what was going on with Biden for me to and the Black Lives Matter, and the Black Lives riots that happened in Los Angeles for me to think, hold on a minute, what was I thinking? There was a guy out in America at the time called Brandon Straka, Um, and he was one of the people that was actually, I think, arrested over January 6th, even though um, he'd never gone into the property. He was arrested, but he had a group called Walk Away,
Right.
and I think I became quite active, and I watched a lot of the Walk Away videos, kind of about why a lot of the liberals and Democrats were walking away from that. So I think I was kind of fiscally conservative, a little bit more liberal. But with that said, I was centre, but the left has just moved so far left. And, if you're just exactly as you are now, you're almost seen as far right. And that's what I don't understand. None of my views have changed that much, but I'm now seen as very, right leaning.
Definitely, it's like some of the stuff like you mentioned there, or it's BLM, or just saying stuff like two genders is now considered
Yes.
a right wing, whereas I'm sure 5, 10 years ago that was didn't matter what side you were on, it was just a, and
Yeah.
now it's very, very political. What was it like in LA? Because we hear very generally at the moment quite negative stories of LA. What was it like when you were there for that period?
Um, well, I went out for the sunshine, and I've always been a very health conscious person. And I think there's two sides to LA. There's a dark side, a very dark side to it. But there's also very like um, healthy, conscious, um, holistic kind of way of living, which is why I think, 4, 5 years ago when COVID was going on, I was listening more to chiropractors and um, you know, alternative, how do you get healthcare people, as
Yeah.
opposed to, big pharma and the doctors. Um, so um so for me, I think Los Angeles in that way had quite an impact on my way of thinking in terms of that. But um there did get to a point, I think I was going to turn 40, where I thought I can't live in this place where people don't settle down. It's like a Peter Pan land. It's not conducive to settling down, having a family. And I want to be, I had horses as well, and I wanted to be back in England. So I wasn't really involved in that darker side of Hollywood. I knew it existed, kind of the parties and the kind of um, in the Hollywood Hills and all of that. But I don't know. I think people can read people, can't they? And I've probably got a sign on across my head that says that I would not be interested in that kind of thing. So, I know there was like the casting couch situation, but I got out of modeling by that point.
Right.
I wasn't there trying to act. So no one could really, there was no kind of hold over me, or,
Right.
for people to try and kind of hang some bait over me to get me into that. No one could fulfill any promises by promising me like emptiness. So for me, it was just I had my horse out there. I loved the sunshine. I loved going to yoga every day. I was leading a very holistic kind of life, and that's the part that I loved about it.
I'm guessing just off the back of that, and I'm having seen you on social media and stuff, that you're probably very happy with RFK Jr. having such a prominent role in the Trump
Yes.
administration.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the thing. See, this is why it's like all the lines have been kind of blurred now, haven't they, by him? Because he was a Democrat, he was a liberal, just like Tulsi Gabbard. And they also said, like, everything's just gone crazy. Everything has just moved so far left that, it's not normal. And where the old Democrats were against the big corporations, or supposed to be. You see
Yep.
that they're all taking money from them. You've seen Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, you've seen Bernie Sanders. They're all attacking RFK, and they're all taking that big pharma money, even though they claim it's not. Bernie Sanders said it's not from the CEOs of big pharma. They're kind of, they're taking that money from wherever it's coming from. Maybe not the CEOs of big pharma, but there's certainly some big pharma money in there. So I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled that he's well, I think he's got in now.
Yeah. Well, talk about the sort of health conscious stuff in LA and in general now, because it's really like quite a big topic right now with obviously RFK becoming the in the administration, and even during COVID, there was a lot
Yeah.
of talk on terms of health became a really prominent thing that everyone was talking about. What was some of the health practices that you adopted in LA, and do you think some of those stuff, if you like, the wider, the wider UK could potentially adapt?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I've always thought like food is the most important thing, and avoiding all the additives and the chemicals and even things like artificial sweeteners or things like margarines. Um, that are basically, they're all they're none of it's natural. So I was always trying to eat like, really good, wholesome, natural food. Um, if I had a headache, someone would say, "Oh, have you taken an aspirin or this?" And I'd forget. I would always think, right, headache, glass of water. I never kind of thought, oh, take a pill to solve that. It was always like, what can I do? I've always had a bad back, and I've always gone to a chiropractor. Um, it's from riding and falling off horses and constant wear and tear. So I've always gone to a chiropractor. I've always done yoga. And I've always, wanted to take care of my body, not for vanity, but
Yeah.
because I think it's really important. You only have one. And if you don't have good health and a good immune system and you don't do what's good for you, then obviously that's going to lead to disease. You can't fight things off. So, I didn't drink a lot, and I don't do drugs and all these kinds of things. I try and eat really healthy, and I try and exercise. And stress is a huge factor with health. And I know I get stressed. That's probably the one thing I'm really bad at controlling, because I look at everything around me and I see this country and the country that I love, and it does stress me out seeing what happens. So stress is a huge factor with illness and disease, and I know that sometimes the stress can take its toll on me. And also rest. People forget how important it is to rest and relax and not just be constantly at it all the time, which is hard for people, when they have a 9 to 5 job, when they have children, when then they're trying to look after their bodies and they're trying to cook healthily. um, so it's very difficult to maintain health. But this whole idea of drugging people or injecting people in order to gain health it's always been nonsense, absolute nonsense to me.
I think where I've got maybe some similarities with yourself, I think I've definitely got it maybe from my dad. He's really into yoga and always has been. He's always been kind of that, I think it's called like Ayurvedic, that kind of treatment where it's like you're, more
Yes.
from natural. He would be very, never take a pill, never take anything. He's like your body, immune system, eat natural foods, whole foods, and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's was really surprising during COVID when there was so much focus on taking the jab rather
Yeah.
than improving people's health. I've seen you talk about it really well. What was some of the stuff you were saying quite early on during the lockdowns when people were really pushing the vaccines?
Well, I was questioning why there was no talk about going out, getting fresh air, taking we were my biggest complaint was that we know that sunshine, because you get your vitamins from the vitamin D, um, fresh air, good food, all of that helps your health. And we were told the opposite. We were told stay indoors, only go out the house for an hour a day. Don't exercise. Football clubs, were shut. Your parks, you couldn't even go out to a park and exercise. You could only be out for an hour. Um, all kids, uh, games and social activities were all shut down, which is bad for their health mentally as well. Um, and so to me, it was the opposite. It was everything was like the opposite of what we should be doing. And I kind of said that. I said that we're not looking at health as we should be. Um, and you're talking about locking people down. You're talking about giving them vaccines to people that won't even be affected by COVID in a really bad way. We're talking about all of this, but we're not talking about what makes us healthy as people and what we should be doing, and what maybe vitamins we might be deficient in and what we might be taking. And if you were to talk about sunshine and fresh air and vitamin D or vitamin B or vitamin C or any of these things, you immediately got called a conspiracy theorist. I got, headlines all over the papers saying that I'm shaming fat people and that fat people are causing lockdowns to be longer. But if you actually look at what I said it's these people, the people having a go at me are people that aren't looking after their health. They're not, they're kind of stagnant people who aren't eating well, who aren't exercising, who aren't doing what they should do for their health, telling me about how I should live my life and be a healthier person and what I should put into my body, to protect them. And it's like, look after yourself and look after your health, look after your immune system, help your immune system, and then, stop telling me about what I should be doing, and how to look after my body when you're the way. So I got into I got into a lot of trouble for doing that. I was called, an anti-vaxxer, and I was talking about Djokovic as well. Look at Djokovic,
Yeah.
one of the healthiest people in the world, like an absolute superstar athlete, and he was banned from Australia. So it was all just madness to me. None of it makes sense. And I kind of laugh about it now because it was just so ludicrous that they were doing this.
Well, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. How can you take lectures from people who are, really unhealthy and who don't look after their own bodies, and then they're lecturing everyone else on how to, one of the great things of RFK is a man in his 70s and he's in incredible shape for a
Yeah,
for a person of his age. It's incredible. So like when he talks about health, you want to listen, you hope to be in that sort of shape if you're in your 70s. It's
yeah.
amazing. So it's really, and again with Djokovic, I found that so strange. You've got one of the probably the healthiest and fittest people in the planet. Tennis is cardio fitness, muscle fitness. I think his body fat's like must be close to like 0%. Like he's pure, just an amazing athlete. And if he's saying, I don't want to take the jab, and I think, it's fair enough. That's probably the least risky person that there is, and the obesity thing, there is, there's. I think if we look at the UK, it's probably one of the worst crises that we have in health is
Hmm.
obesity. It's just getting worse. So I think you're completely right to point out that the obesity in the UK, the government would have done a much better thing if they tried to improve, decrease the rates of obesity. I think that would have been a much better push than maybe pushing the vaccines. I
I
think
mean,
that's
and if you looked, people that died with comorbidities like heart disease, like diabetes, and these are things that are preventable through, your diet and lifestyle. And when you look at that and well, hold on a minute, I've got no comorbidities like this, so I'm probably going to be okay. Why should I put something into my body that there's been no long-term studies for, and I don't know, anything of, I don't really know anything about it? Why should I put that into mine? So, that was the big problem that I had. And as I said, it got me into a lot of trouble. It got me thrown off Instagram. And it was just, it's ridiculous. And now I see, Mark Zuckerberg saying, yeah, well, we're going to stop the censorship. And like, you know what? I lost 10 years of really important photos of my animals, of my friends, of my family, of people and pets that are no longer with me. And, I lost that because I said that I didn't agree with lockdowns and I didn't agree with an experimental um, experiment. I didn't want to be the a test dummy for it, and I lost my account for I lost my account for that. It's still not back. So, you know
crazy. How did that happen? So you're saying this stuff about lockdowns, COVID, whatever, and then
yeah.
you just wake up one day and Instagram just doesn't work.
Well, coincidentally, it was the night the Daily Mail journalist spoke to me. So I had a Daily Mail journalist. She called me, or she'd left me an email. I thought, you know what, I'll just reply to this. I'll hold my position. She's asking me what I think about Djokovic. What did they? I think I wrote "Proud Refusenik." I had that as my Instagram name, "Proud Refusenik," because we got. I think they tried to say it. We're Refuseniks. Like they tried to make it into this thing that I'm this anti-vaxxer Refusenik. So I was like, well, you know what? I'll call it. I'll own it. I don't care. Call me whatever you want at this point. I simply don't care. So I thought, you know what? I'll call her back and I'll just say what I think, and I'll hold my position on it. Um, and I think it was like a Friday or a Saturday, and the Sunday double page spread. It was myself, um, some other reality star, Anna Debussy, the lawyer, who sadly passed away, um, and the man that was on YouTube, the older man that would always speak in his chair. I can't remember his name. He was called the. I think he called himself the man in the chair, but he was
Okay.
this very wise, that older man that would speak about it all. So we were on there, and that day that went out, I went onto my Instagram and my account was just down. That was it. Couldn't log into it. It's like, oh my God, and I know other people's had gone and they'd lost their accounts. I was like, please don't tell me I've had my account taken down. So then I tried to put one in using like my name O1, like, or Leilani Dowding instead of Leilani Dowding. So I tried to make a variation and it went up for a minute, and I got a load of followers back who were obviously trying to search. And then it got taken down again within a couple of hours or a couple of days. And then I must have tried 4 times. And every time, if I used my name, my account got taken down. Um, and then obviously being from LA, someone knew somebody who worked at Instagram who was going to try and get me my account back. They didn't want any money. I know it wasn't a scam. They said, like, if we get your account back, we can pay you. They didn't ask for passwords. I know that's a scam if they ask for passwords. They didn't ask for my passwords. They didn't ask for money up front. And they said, this is the strangest thing. And he's a guy that had got some other accounts bought back. But not for COVID, or not for talk about lockdowns, not for any of that. Accounts because people have been reported, or something like that. But he'd got people's accounts back, and he'd said to my friend whose account he got back for her, he said, this is the strangest thing. I cannot get her account back. I've not seen anything like it. It's permanently locked. I can't get it back. I'm sorry. And so I knew it was just, the whole it was the whole COVID thing. So I did set up another one, but I didn't use my full name. And I was just very cautious about what I would say on there. And then I kind of just thought, you know what? I'll say a bit more on Twitter because I don't have that many followers. So if I get taken down, whatever, at least I can vent. That's half my thing. I just need to vent and get this off my chest, so I'm not this like angry little ball of fire walking around everywhere. I'll just use Twitter to vent. And then Elon Musk took it over. So, I then pretty much was allowed to say whatever I wanted.
Well, you've got a massive, massive X Twitter following, and obviously one of the big things that you talked about, alluded to COVID there, and some of these conspiracy theories that you've talked about, and they've what's been crazy is a lot of them are true now. Like we know for a fact, a lot of these so-called conspiracies are not actually conspiracies.
Yeah.
So talking about the lockdowns and when you started questioning. And what was that experience like when they sort of, if you like, went after you? You talked about some of the newspaper articles and all that sort of stuff. What was that experience like for yourself?
Do you know, I think I've got a tough skin. And I have to say, I think that's the one good thing I can take from modeling, that it's given me a very, very tough skin. So I didn't really, I didn't panic about it. I wasn't filled with fear. And I knew that there were a lot of people that I'd noticed, such as there was a chef called Pete Evans in Australia, um, Matthew Marsden, the actor. He was another person. I'd seen them in the newspapers, and I'd started following them because I'd seen the newspapers absolutely battering them about their stance. And so I thought, you know what? It's not a bad thing. I've I could see on my Instagram as I would say things. First of all, when I was on Instagram, I was getting absolutely battered. I lost a load of subscribers or followers, and I thought, you know what, it's fine if you just want to see me for, like, what I'm wearing, or some materialistic nonsense, because I'd done the housewife show. If that's why you're following me, I don't care. Go, it's fine. And then I noticed that I'd have a lot more followers that were following me because of my anti-lockdown stance. And then I noticed them, and the great thing was, is they were all talking to each other in the comments. It was almost like a little community. So I was really, it made me really happy to see that, no one was feeling too alone. You could come onto my page and you could meet like-minded people, and and I know there was some like great friendships that like blossomed out of that. Obviously then it got taken down and I got battered in the newspapers, but I thought, you know what, it's fine, because people who feel the same way will now be able to find me even easier, because you battering me in the papers, they'll know what my ex is. And I think that's kind of what happened. So to me it was a good thing, because I felt like I could meet, even if it's just, through, not in person, I could meet like-minded people, and we all had a place where we could all talk and communicate. So it was a horrible thing, but at the same time, I didn't take it personally. It didn't make me panic or anything like that.
Were you surprised at how many people were thinking the same as you? So, when you made these comments on these various newspapers, because I can imagine initially you're probably worried with, like, these newspapers going after you saying horrible things, but were you then
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised in a way that there were so many people who were thinking exactly the same as what you were thinking?
Yeah, I was really surprised actually. I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it would just be, I don't know what I thought, but I realized that it was everyone from all different walks of life, just questioning it all. Um, and it's crazy, the amount of people, and I'd go on the protests and stuff, and the amount of people from all different walks of life that probably wouldn't have met each other had it not happened is quite, it's quite incredible. So, um, you know, I might be next to a heart surgeon at one point, like Dr. Asima Holtra, or, I was chatting to Gareth Icke, who, I read his dad's books years and years ago, and absolutely found his books really fascinating when he talked about big pharma and the banking cartels, and um, all the kind of corporate greed. So I started to meet all these people, and um, sorry, I've drifted off my point, but I think, yeah, I didn't take any of it. I didn't take any of it, like, personally. And I did feel like there was a community building, and I did feel that there were definitely more people that wanted to ask questions. And I think what it was as well is there were a lot of people who were afraid for their jobs, or afraid for their families about speaking up or speaking out. And I think that I was in a position where, I don't have a boss, I don't have anyone to answer to in terms of work and career. I have a very supportive fiance, and he was very supportive at the time. Um, and so I was in a position where I thought, well, if I can't speak up, who can? I almost felt like, it is my duty to let all these people be able to get together and find each other. Um, because if I don't do it, who will?
Well, I think what's amazing is, there's as time's gone on, you've basically been proven right with a lot of this stuff, and especially with the jab, and how much now there is that skepticism towards it. We know we're seeing more and more the horrible side effects towards
Yeah.
it, and the sort of the impact on it. When did you start to speak out against, if you like, the jab and lockdowns? Were you straight off the bat? Whenever the lockdown march, something where you straight, or did it
Yeah.
time?
I want to say, I think there was 2 weeks when I was a little fearful. There was about 2 weeks um, when I was a little, because I remember my fiance going to the gym, and I was like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" kind of thing. But it was before the lockdowns. But then when the lockdowns happened, I was like, "This is crazy," because first of all, we need to have a choice, but and then I was like, well, no, I remember. I think that there was a minute where I was feeling sorry for restaurant owners, because restaurant owners were saying no one was coming into the restaurants. And unless it was a specific government lockdown, people who were holding events or needed to cancel things because of low turnout they weren't going to get insurance money. So for maybe a week or so, I think I understood as to why. And then I thought, well, hold on a minute, this is weird. Why have they got, why are they doing these death counters? If somebody had cancer, you would always be positive, wouldn't you? And my fiance's he's had cancer, and people call up and they tell you good stories about people that have survived, or the person they know that just beat it, or something alternative that, try this, this is what my friend's done, and he found that this alternative therapy worked either by itself or alongside what the doctors are doing. And this is what usually happens with a horrible thing like cancer, or any kind of illness or disease. And the opposite was happening. Everything was being silenced and shut down. You were just being told constantly about all the people that were dying, and that plays havoc on your mind. And your mind is so important with healing and with anything. What's going on with you mentally, and subconsciously, I think that's really important. So that I was watching the film, and I was like, okay, this isn't right. This is really, really wrong. And now add in that the economy is going to absolutely fall to pieces. Then they started doing furlough, and I thought, yeah, well, it's good for a minute. This is, people like, Leilani, you can't be thinking about money. And I'm like, no, but you wait until this all has to be repaid, or the money's got to be found from somewhere, and then people really are going to find out what it's like to have an economy fall to pieces, which is what we're seeing now. Then I was looking at all the scams, the PPE scams, and Matt Hancock dishing out all these PPE contracts to what was it, a pub landlord that he was friends with, got a contract, and Michelle Moon got a contract, or her husband got a contract, sorry, Michelle Moon's husband got the contract. And all of this stuff was happening, and you were hearing it, and I'm like, this is an absolute scam. And then I started thinking, you know what they're going to do? They're going to give us one option. They're going to make life so hard that they're going to force us to have a vaccine. And I remember speaking to a couple of my GP friends, and they were like, no, they would never do that, and they would never go after the children, and I'm like, no, I know they are. And I had this feeling in my stomach, this like anxiety, and this feeling that it was just going to get worse, and it was going to get worse, and they were going to clamp down on us tighter and tighter. And I just felt so claustrophobic, like I couldn't escape it. And then you were seeing people that they couldn't be with their loved ones when their loved ones died. They couldn't hold their hands. They couldn't, be with their pets when their pets were put to sleep. And I just thought, this is so wrong. And we forget a lot of this. It's time's gone by, and unless it's actually happened to that person, and that, the person was the one that, like Lawrence Fox, for example, who wasn't, they couldn't comfort each other at their mother's funeral. They were only allowed a certain amount of people. To them, they're going to remember this forever. But a lot of people, like me, could easily forget, if we allowed ourselves to forget, how absolutely horrific and heinous these rules were. And especially now when you see, Starmer's broken them as well. So I just, to me, it was really, really early on. I'd say a week into it, and I just thought, and everyone thought I was mental. Everyone was like, they're not going to push you. If you don't want the jab, Leilani, you won't have to have it. And I'm like, oh no, I know they're not going to necessarily hold me down and put it in my arm, but they will start putting restrictions on people. And I will find my own ways and loopholes how to get around, because I'm pretty good at that. But I will, but for other people, they wouldn't be able to. Like, for example, you were allowed stupid things, like you could have a cleaner or somebody in town. Well, I went round to my sisters, and I'd like, right, if I get caught, I'll say I'm your cleaner. I'll start loading the dishwasher, or I'll go into your house with a high vis jacket and pretend I'm doing some work. They but unless you're prepared to break the rules, if you're like a good, and I'm not somebody who normally goes against rules or laws, but this to me was just stupid, and this was harmful. And that's why, I kind of, spoke out, and I'd put it on my I'd put it on my Instagram and I'd say, look, I'm sitting on a park bench with my sister drinking a cup of coffee when we weren't allowed to do that. And then I'd have people like, at Staffordshire Police, look at this, at Staffordshire Police, tagging it all in. But I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna try and show people there is a kind of way, and you're not going to be in jail necessarily.
I think with the vaccine stuff, I think to get both of them right is pretty, pretty amazing because I
Yeah,
remember at the time I think for me the lockdowns were a really big deal. I really was anti-lockdowns from the start. I've got a finance background, so in my head I was like this, people don't always put the
yeah,
between how when an economy fails, people do die. It's not as
yes,
the headline's not as sexy as killer virus kills people, but
hmm,
it's more you destroy you can less money comes into the NHS,
yeah,
less gets puts into drug companies, science companies, life science. So what ends up happening is those resources get taken out. There's a really good study from 2008 financial crisis where about 500,000 to 1 million people died because of the financial crisis. So some's direct, some is you lose your job and you commit suicide. Some of it's
yeah,
more stagnant, some of it's more you don't get GP appointments quick enough. So there's loads of studies when there's a crisis economically, people do end up dying. And I remember just thinking, this is so bizarre. And the thing that really annoyed me was I think it was May 2020, where it was reported the lowest month ever for cancer being recorded in the UK.
yeah,
It's records. And I remember there was a doctor or professor who came out and said, this is absolutely horrible news because cancer hasn't stopped, but people are so scared to go to their
yeah,
GP that they're not actually getting checked. So you may have a
yeah,
cough, you usually may go to the GP and he'd say, you know what, you're at early stages of lung cancer, but it's okay, it's treatable. They were not going to the GP because they were scared of a virus that
yeah,
we now know was 99.9% would survive from. But this instead they're now showing early signs of cancer. They didn't get treated, and so I would love them to share more data on the people who've died in the last 2 years that potentially could have been prevented had they, had the lockdown rules not been as crazy as they were. So I think it's really important, like you say, we forget this was 4 years ago,
yeah.
and what's sad is I don't think anyone's, whether it's the Labour, Tories, people are being accountable for it. I'd love them to just put their hands up and say, we made some really bad mistakes. Really, we got it wrong, but we're going to learn from it. But it doesn't seem that's going to happen.
No, it really seems that way. It seems as though, I mean, this is the thing. There's just so many awful things happening in this country that it's very easy for people to forget about it and sweep it under the carpet. But yeah, as you said, like there were so many people that needed to go for doctor's appointments that were getting cancelled, that were too scared to go, for checkups. Um, and or then people that lost their jobs, self-employed people, they lost their small businesses, they lost their homes, they lost their relationships because it put so much strain on them, and it was just a horrific time, and it was hard if anybody did want to speak up. They were absolutely annihilated by their peers a lot of the time, by their work colleagues, by their bosses. And I think it was a really hard time for people to actually stand up to any of it. And then obviously as soon as like mandates and stuff came through, um, that was even worse. And the thing is what I said about this, like splitting the audience. For some reason, I don't know why they just found it so great on those daytime shows to have the most awful people coming on there and saying these people that don't take the vaccine, people who make a choice shouldn't get shouldn't be able to see a doctor. They shouldn't be allowed to be in the same room as me. They shouldn't be able to take a lift with me. Piers Morgan said he claims, oh, I didn't know and I didn't have the data. But the data was all there for you, for me, if you wanted to look. And as a journalist, he should have looked. But people like this, they were saying those awful things that we shouldn't. That if we fell over and broke a leg, we shouldn't be able to see a doctor. And they encouraged this. This is they had um, psychiatrists in the government on the Sage Group that were putting this out. How can we make people take it? Well, peer pressure and all of this, and they helped they help that peer pressure by having the most awful people on TV saying, basically treating us like we were lepers for saying, look, I don't agree with this. I don't agree with mandates. I shouldn't be forced. I want to look after my health in the way that I always have done.
I think Sage really, in hindsight, I think they almost have blood on their hands for the way they
Mm,
acted during the course of those 2 years. The way they create the fear, the way they force people to take these vaccines is absolutely absurd. And it's funny you talk about the people on TV when they were saying that they should get treated for a doctor. I remember at the time my wife girlfriend at the time, she was the first person who I was speaking to who was quite not anti-vaxxer, but she didn't want the jab. And I remember thinking, well, I'm no medical professional. I don't, I try to eat healthy and exercise and all that stuff, but
yeah,
I'm not a medical professional at all. And I remember thinking, and she was very clear, like, there's not been enough research on this jab. I've done my medical degree and, I don't want to take it. And, I want to maybe one day have children. So if I take this jab, we don't know the repercussions. And I remember thinking, wow, like, you're in the medical profession. Why are you like an anomaly? Like, are you the only one? And then she'd say no. Like, lots of her peers think the same thing,
yeah,
and blah blah. And I remember thinking, but these people are never on TV. Like these medical professionals who were not keen on the jab or not keen on what was going on. From what I saw on TV, it was only the medical experts were telling us to do it, and if we weren't,
yeah.
then we were basically evil, bad people. And so in my head, then I started doing a bit more digging, and I saw no, there was loads of people in the NHS, people across healthcare who were not very keen on this jab, but they were
Yeah.
never given any airtime.
No, it's crazy. They really weren't. I think GB News was the only news outlet that actually would have some of these doctors on. And as you kind of looked at Twitter, you'd see a few more of them, but then you'd also see them getting really badly attacked, and people were even going after their careers and reporting to them to the GMC, and it was nuts. I had a friend who had recommended high vitamin C and vitamin D, and things that you would take maybe if you had flu symptoms, and she got a letter saying that she needed to take it all down from her website, and it was bad. It was really, really bad, and I think it was a huge red flag. But a lot of people weren't in that position, and they weren't fortunate enough to know doctors personally who felt that way. Luckily I was in a position where I did know quite a few.
I mean, it was such a scary time in the way that all happened. What are some of the other, if you like, some of the conspiracies that you have almost taken on and that have, if you like, been either proven to be true or just general things that that have been going on?
Oh gosh, ow, I'm gonna have a total mind blank, but I'm always getting called a conspiracy theorist.
Okay,
Oh
where did
gosh,
that start? Where did that start? Why do people say you're a conspiracy theorist? Where did that all start from?
do you know what? I honestly don't know it, because no one ever said it pre-COVID. I think it was because I was like, oh, they're gonna bring digital IDs in, and they're going to really want digital IDs. Um, Sorry, my dog's really. They're going to really want digital IDs. And everyone's like, that's never going to happen. And then you see it now. You see this push. You're constantly seeing Tony Blair, you know, pushing for them. And I think that's how it was. I was like, right, these lockdowns are going to go on. No, that's not going to happen. It's just. Then I was like, no, the vaccines. They're going to start pushing the vaccines. They're going to make it mandatory. And if they they're not going to necessarily hold us down, but they're going to start taking away our rights, saying we can't go places, saying we can't travel if we don't have them. And while England wasn't as bad, it was pretty terrible in America. And this blows my mind that it was only maybe a week ago or 2 weeks ago that the USA have actually lifted the mandate for people who want to become citizens. So all the people, trying to get their green cards or become citizens of the USA, they have had to have the COVID vaccine. And this
Wow.
is only just been stopped, you know, and they stopped people from traveling. It took ages until they dropped the mandate for, you know, foreigners to go into America without the jab. Luckily, I have an American citizenship as well, so I was going backwards and forwards to America. But some of my friends who were only on green cards, for example, or only on visas, they weren't allowed to go back and forwards. They couldn't leave the country. They couldn't leave America to come back to England because they wouldn't be able to get back in again. Um, so you know, I kind of foresaw that, and yeah, I just got called a conspiracy theorist for that. But I've got been called every single name, every, you know, all the names in the book at the moment. So you know, and then actually I think because I'd lived in Los Angeles, I did say, I was like, listen, we need to be careful because this kind of critical race theory is going to come over here. This trans agenda is going to come over here. Um, and people were like, no, no, it's not going to be here. That's just like a little fad that's going on in America. And now it's actually worse here than it is there because, you know, Donald Trump's clamping down on it all. So it's actually, I think, going to get a lot worse here before it gets better.
Did you see some of that stuff happening in LA when you were living there? The critical race theory, the gender stuff. Did you see some of that when you were in LA?
Well, I didn't see it being taught in schools because at that time, as I said, I wasn't, you know, I don't have children, so I wasn't paying attention to the schools. But there was, um, there was definitely the elements of DEI there. I felt like there had been other things where BLM had got together, and I'd known the background, say, of BLM, and when I, you know, and I knew that they were kind of money laundering, and I knew it wasn't about taking the money and raising the money and putting it into communities. And but I'd seen there was definitely a push as well to saying that, you know, white people are suppressing us, and you know, we're kind of victims, and it was the white liberals that were pushing it. So it wasn't even led by black people. This is the thing, and a lot of BLM wasn't kind of led by black people. When you would see the BLM riots, a lot of them were white people. Um, so it wasn't even the black people. And you know, I remember um, during the BLM, when BLM was going on in Los Angeles, the riots over George Floyd, there were black people telling white people, stop doing this in our name. Like, do not do this. And there were people graffitiing BLM on buildings. The black people saying, do not do this. But it was white liberals doing it. And then it's white liberals that are pushing this whole thing. Like, the white people have been suppressing you, and you're all victims. And so it's a weird concept, or the white or you know, the university saying, like, you know, let's give black people their safe spaces, when it's really like segregation. It's really weird to me. It's almost like, well, it is, they were pushing the racism. The liberals were really pushing it and trying to say, you are, you know, you're down here, we're here, but they're trying to do it almost as though they're helping. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a
It's like
weird, because
yeah,
it was confusing to me. I was looking at it thinking, what you're saying is actually really racist, but you're trying
yeah.
to wrap it up as kindness.
They're
And,
trying to
you
say
know,
like they're the saviors, like we can save like
yes,
that kind of. There's an amazing video when BLM was happening, and it was just an ordinary black woman who's walking past this another woman who's holding like a BLM sign, and they're like shouting at each other, and the black woman was saying, "Why do you keep saying I'm oppressed? I'm not oppressed. You're oppressing me. I'm in America. I'm in the most free
yeah,
country in the world. I can do what I want. Stop saying that I'm oppressed because I'm not." And it was really, I remember watching that thinking, wow, that's amazing. And it's interesting because I feel like that's happening also in the UK with a lot of
yes,
DEI and all this stuff. I'm sure if
yeah,
you speak to most ethnic minorities, no one really cares. It seems to be a much bigger push with the white liberals, the middle, they're like the upper class London kind of,
yeah.
which is bizarre.
And it's, but you know, my mum's Filipino, so I'm half Filipino. And when I was growing up, I'm in my 40s. When I was growing up and I was in school, it was never an issue. Everyone just got on. We were all kids. We all got on. No one was trying to say that we were victims. No one was trying to say that anyone was suppressing us. It was just, we're all kids having a laugh, me pretending I'm a horse, not being told that I'm literally could be that if I wanted to. It was just like, I had a friend who was said, her mum said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she says, oh, I want to be a sheep. And her mum wasn't like, right, let's encourage that. And it was just like, oh, they're kids. Let kids be kids. And, we've just, all these issues, it's like we've manufactured them. By then, and it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that, 40 years ago. Things have got worse because everyone keeps pushing it, and they're pushing like this critical race theory, and they're pushing like, you're oppressed if you're not from England originally. And it's like, no, stop it. And yeah, so, it's got really crazy.
I mean, it's so scary of what's going on in Britain at the moment. When you moved 6 years ago, did you think um, Britain would be like this now in 2025? Did you think that we'd be going down this road, if you like, 6 years ago when you moved back?
You know what? I didn't. I really didn't. I moved back to England because I thought, right, I just need a bit of countryside. I need to be out of city. I need some space. I just want to ride my horse, meet an English guy with some banter and just, live happily ever after. And then, like, bloody COVID happened. And I've never felt so claustrophobic and squeezed in my life. And I think that opened the way to me looking at, like, our government and our leaders and seeing how both the Tories and Labour have taken the absolute piss out of us for the last however long, years, decades even. And that this situation isn't just kind of overnight, but it seems to be happening faster and faster and faster. And um, the Tories were fake conservatives. I don't think they were like conservative or tough enough in any way. And as soon as you start being loose on crime, which they were, loose on crime, loose on really important things, and then and and then starting pushing like um this kind of critical race that I don't know, I think it's called that in England, or just pushing division by saying, by instead of making us like all one together, by actually saying, by like the whole BLM thing that came here. Why is Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner taking a knee for a criminal in America when we've got so many problems here? And all of that leads to more division and focusing on one person there and saying, right, all of everything that's happening in America is happening here, and bringing all those issues over here, along with like two-tier policing, along with being really soft on crime, um, along with opening borders, and along with taking all of our tax money and just blowing it willy-nilly on things that do not serve the British people. All of this is going to make people more and more angry, and I do think it's something that they plan. And um we're much more easily controlled when we're all upset than if we're living happy, joyous lives. So we're living, they're just squeezing in on us, and it just seems like, I don't know if it's because I've really kind of looked at it the last 4 or 5 years, or if it's just been happening anyway, but I feel like it's happening at a much more accelerated speed. Everything that's going on, it's just like, where do you look? You want to get up one day and just go to work and have a nice day and spend it with your family, but as soon as you hear what's going on, it's just like, makes you feel angry, or it makes you feel anxious. And I feel like they're purposely doing that. They're purposely messing with us.
I couldn't agree more, and I think COVID and lockdowns were a way for them to gain that extra control. And I think
Yeah.
that was always my real concern with
Hmm.
why I had such a big problem with lockdowns, even more than the vaccine at the time, was I'm always scared that when government gets more power, it doesn't matter if it's Tory or Labour, very few will give power away. You get that
Yeah.
power, you're going to give it. It's so hard to then give away, and it's just when Boris Johnson and the Tories did that, you know, Labour are going to come. They're not going to give away this power, and you can see what
No.
they're doing with freedom of speech. They're making it even worse, and so like it's a real unless you have like a somebody. I think you have to be so strong, like a Trump style character
Yeah.
to break things now. I don't think you can be ordinary. I think you actually have to be a bit almost delusional, a bit super strong, which I think Trump 100% is.
Yeah.
He can do these things, whereas I think if you're just middle kind of I think some of these guys don't have that many principles or values anyway, but you've got to have really strong values, and I think the concern is right now in the UK. I don't know where that's going to come from right now. I know Reform's doing amazing in terms of polling and stuff, but I'm just really skeptical at the moment to see like what's going to happen next.
And that's the thing, we do need somebody really strong, and we do need somebody that will not be afraid to reverse some of the things that this awful government have put in place. But I don't know if we'll see that. As you said, historically, as soon as the governments get power, they don't want to hand anything back, despite what they might say, or the next people that are trying to get in are going to tell us. I don't think they are necessarily going to hand any power back that they've taken away from us. Um, and like you said, I do think the lockdowns were a level of control to see how many people would listen and would fall in line. And I think the British people did a wonderful job of playing into their hands and showing them that they'll be completely compliant and do what everything that they're told, with the correct messaging from the media and the correct messaging of propaganda, that they kind of did fall in line. And that's what's really, that is very, very scary to me. And I do think a lot of this is planned. I really do, and that's another conspiracy. We're going back to what you said about conspiracy theories, about a global kind of a global elite, or parasites that that are running this. This is was Trump would say the deep state.
Yeah,
You can call it what you want, a cabal, the elite, the parasites, but everyone's like, "Ah, that's a conspiracy theory." Of course there aren't these people like controlling it. Well, yes, there are. That there's the money men. There's people um like Gates and Soros, that have so much wealth that buys them the power that they can control, and they can manipulate countries, they can manipulate markets, they can manipulate, they can cause coups, there is a level there of people above governments that can, that are controlling things. And Starmer makes a perfect little robot
yeah,
with this. He's devoid of all personality. He's a perfect little robot to carry, these things out. So you need somebody like a Trump that can stand up to that if they really care about the country, to stand up to it. So I don't know if we've got someone like that, but I certainly don't think there's anybody on the Conservative Party at the moment, the Tory Party, that can do that. I think we've got a bit of hope um, with reform if they can follow through. I absolutely love Rupert Lowe at the moment.
yeah.
He's
He's amazing.
saying what so many British people think. So yeah,
It's interesting because going back to the almost the start of this where we talked about conspiracy theory. We were told it definitely didn't come from a lab leak, the virus, and that was a massive. Anyone that said that was a conspiracy. We now know
yeah,
it did basically come from a lab leak. We were told with a vaccine that stop 100% stop transmission.
yeah,
No, anyone that went against that, again, conspiracy theorist. We now know that was a lie. There's been so many of these conspiracy theories especially the last 4 or 5 years, that have all been proven to be true. So
yeah,
it's really, really hard to trust anything that you hear at the moment. And I think what you said about Sikhistan, I couldn't agree more. I think he is a complete example. if you had doubt about, deep state, global elites, then I think he should to put those doubts to rest. He is so clearly the amount of time he spends. He doesn't even try to hide it to me. The amount of time he spends abroad and going to Brussels when we're not even in the EU, it just makes yeah. I couldn't agree more.
We've got all these little, I call them the acronym clubs, like, these 3 letter, 2 letter words, I think the WEF, WHO, all of these people making decisions. None of us elected those people. Who are they to make decisions and tell us what we need to do in our countries when we didn't have any process in putting those people or giving those people, any kind of power? And then you have to look at the money funding them. So I think, yeah, I do definitely think that there are so many things. And I think that's the thing. I can't even think of what's a conspiracy anymore, because pretty much, you know, they've all been shown to have come true. I'm just waiting to see the JFK files to see who, now that they've been released, to see what the truth is with that.
So yeah, again, likewise. I mean, there's so much stuff now. Like I've gone from not really listening to any conspiracy theories. Now I'm open to everything. I think Candace Owens is accusing Macron's wife as being a boy in a earlier life. But if you said that to me 5, 10 years ago, 100%, she's talking crazy.
Yeah.
Whereas now, I'm yeah, maybe like I don't know. Like I'm open to whatever now because I've completely lost the trust of whatever I see
Yeah.
on TV.
Absolutely. No, I think, and I just think it's always good to have an open mind. It's definitely always good to have an open mind as to what is. And then, like you, I was like, hold on a minute. Wait, I need to see this. I need to hit, because this is like, she's put forward some pretty compelling evidence.
Yeah.
And the fact that, she had what they're suing certain journalists for, it's I can't remember, but they're not suing the journalists for what you would expect them to do had it been a complete and utter. No, that's it. Instead of suing for defamation, they were suing for invasion of privacy.
Oh,
So strange. Something, I believe it's something like that. Yeah, instead of suing for what you would expect, they're suing for something else.
right, right. Well, it's been amazing to chat to you, Larry. We could do this for even longer, but conscious of time, we have like a closing tradition on the show where I ask the guest, what is your unpopular opinion that you think should be popular? So it can be some of the stuff we've discussed already, it can be trivial, it can be something completely unrelated, but just an unpopular opinion that you have that you think should be popular.
Ah. Oh no, I shouldn't have think. I think it's because all my opinions should be popular. I don't know. Um, I am going to go with this one because it's positive. That your mind is far more powerful than you could ever know, and you can achieve so much. Um, with your mind, to do with health, um, goals, dreams, whatever. You got to think it first, and then carry it out. I'm not saying you just have to think it will happen, but if you put your mind there, your mind's got the more power than you could possibly ever imagine.
That's a nice positive way to end it. We've sing stuff throughout this episode, so that's a nice way to end it. Thank you for your time, Leilani.
Thank you. And I want to apologise to all your viewers as well for my dog who was chewing, coughing, whining in the background because I don't normally, I normally have him outside, but I thought he'd settle and sleep. So sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.